Hey everyone, and welcome to Mini Scroll, the daily internet culture podcast bringing you the biggest stories from social media, the creator economy, and the digital space every Monday through Thursday and sometimes Fridays. My name is Annabelle, and I'm your Wednesday Mini Tech Scroll host, and also the deputy editor of the youth digital media brand Centennial World. Welcome back to Mini Tech Scroll for another week. We are really getting close to the end of the year. I don't really have too many updates before we get into the stories for this week, apart from the fact that we have officially launched a Patreon for the Centennial World Podcast Network. Lauren has spoken about it on Monday and Tuesday's episode, and it's also linked in the description of this episode. But if you want to join, it is $5.99 AUD a month, and it will mostly be behind the scenes content from Lauren and the Centennial World team and podcast network. And you will be getting at least 3 pieces of extra content per month. I think it will be really fun. There's also a Discord server if you are a member, so I'm really looking forward to see what happens with this new type of content. If you end up enjoying this episode, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe and star rate us on Spotify. And other than that, let's just get right into the content. So the first story that I wanted to talk about today is a little bit niche, but I wanted to talk about this tool that I've seen making the rounds online called Slop Evader. Over the past week, I've seen various tech journalists cover Slop Evader, which is a browser extension. And I know talking about a browser extension might seem a little bit boring, but stay with me. So Slop Evader's function/purpose is quite literally in its name. It's meant to help you evade AI-generated slop. And according to the website, it's a search tool that will only show content that has been published or created before November 30th, 2022, the day ChatGPT was released to the public. Little did we know at the time how much would change since then. But as it's explained on the website, quote, "Since the public release of ChatGPT and other large language models, the internet is being increasingly polluted by AI-generated text, images, and video. This browser extension uses the Google Search API to only return content published before November 30th, 2022. So you can be sure that it was written or produced by the human hand." The extension was built by an Australian artist and environmental engineer called Tiga Brain, and basically how it works is that it shows results before the cutoff date. It doesn't necessarily scan for AI and then filter out those results, but you can basically put a question or query in the extension, and then it will redirect you to the relevant website. And obviously, the information presented might be out of date since it was from before 2023. But the main purpose here is that it's not AI generated, obviously. And also there are already kind of similar functions or tools that exist. Like in Google, you can search a specific time frame for results, but obviously this extension just adds a little bit more drama. I have been scrolling through Reddit to see some of the reactions to Slop Evader, and there has been some mixed responses. I will say that most users definitely seem happy to use or have access to a tool that can filter out AI-generated content. One user took to Reddit writing, quote, "I actually like this idea and will look into using this tool. I don't really want AI quote-unquote summaries of the information that tech bro overlords want me to know and or not know, thanks." A little bit sassy, but fair enough. Some of the negative responses suggest that the tool isn't necessarily as useful as it may seem. As one user wrote, quote, "This doesn't actually solve anything and in fact might make it worse. The thing that humans really need is for people to find their stuff instead of AI slop. Doing this would guarantee that you'll never actually see anything created by a human that's in competition with AI, which is only going to exacerbate the core problem of AI being so prolific and easy to make that it cannibalizes views of human-created content." Another user actually made an interesting point about how the date cutoff might not limit present-day AI content to show up. So they had been using the cutoff date function on Google for a while, and as they wrote, quote, "In the past month or so, I've noticed articles have begun to spoof their metadata or something. So it'll say it's from 2010, but the search will pick up on a text blurb that is obviously present day." So I think that is definitely an important point to consider when you are doing kind of research in this way. But throughout the Reddit threads, people also ended up comparing Slop Evader to other tools that might help you limit AI content. And DuckDuckGo was one that came up quite a bit, which is a browser alternative to Google, let's say, that has added a function that has ultimately allowed users to be able to filter out AI-generated images specifically. At the end of the day, though, I think there is definitely truth to both the positives and negatives around Slop Evader, but according to the creator of the extension, the purpose of Slop Evader is bigger than just avoiding AI-generated content. It's actually about reminding ourselves that we have the choice to, even when it might seem difficult. I thought that was really interesting and a very valid point because we often talk about how so much of our media diet is at the whims of big tech and the algorithm, and a vast majority of it probably is. But I think it's also nice to be reminded that there are some precautions that we might be able to take. And another reason why I thought this story was worth covering, because it's just another example of the pushback to AI-generated content that we're starting to see more and more. Obviously, I covered this when I spoke about Divine, the Vine reboot that will not be allowing any kind of enhanced or AI-generated content on the platform. And I feel like this is something we're going to be seeing more and more of. And I'm curious whether mainstream platforms will start to incorporate ways to kind of limit this content, or if it will be relegated to more niche or indie platforms. I have my doubts about Meta because they are obviously pouring so much money into AI, and AI-generated slop definitely keeps people on platforms like Instagram with Reels. And at the end of the day, that's probably what matters to them. My next story for today is once again about the Australian teen social media ban. I spoke about the so-called ban last week and how Twitch is now included in the list of platforms. But if you didn't catch that episode, I will give a quick summary. On December 10th, so really soon, users under the age of 16 will essentially be kicked off social media platforms, including TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, Snapchat, Twitch, Kick, Reddit, and YouTube. I feel like I said that all very quick in one breath, but there they are. So these apps and platforms will be expected to constantly monitor their users and take reasonable steps to kind of ensure that no child under 16 can create or use an account. And if not, the apps will end up being fined up to $50 million. The update I have for you today, though, is that obviously under 16-year-olds are trying to find a way around the ban, which is something they've honestly been doing for months now. But recently, many teens and tweens have started talking about which apps to switch over to once they are locked out of the ones on the list. And a couple have emerged as top contenders. The first is Lemon8, which is obviously owned by ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, and is a cross of kind of Pinterest, Instagram, and TikTok. And another top contender is Yope, which is a direct messaging photo sharing app. And both have gained significant popularity on the Aussie app stores. On the Apple Store I checked before I recorded this episode, Yope is currently sitting at number 20 and Lemon8 is ironically sitting at number 8. Since these platforms have started to gain traction among this demographic, they have reportedly been, quote, put on notice by the government. According to the ABC, the Communications Minister, Anika Wells, said that the government would, quote, have more to say about the status of these apps and Lemon8 specifically later this week. And according to The Guardian Australia, it appears that, quote, the E-Safety Commission, which is Australia's independent regulator for online safety, has written to Lemon8 to say that the agency would monitor the platform for possible inclusion after the scheme begins. And there are also reports that Lemon8 has chosen to restrict its users to those over 16, even though they're not formally included in the ban at this stage. I thought this was an interesting story to include, even though it is still breaking, because I think we can see how the government and the E-Safety Commissioner will be continually playing catch up to try and keep young users off socials. And while the minister and others admit that it's not going to be perfect off the bat, it goes to show how it will likely be a game of whack-a-mole moving forward. And I do think this dynamic is very common across many of the areas in which governments around the world actually might be trying to legislate social media and the creator economy. I feel like the classic example are family vloggers, where there should have been protections put in place long ago. But at the end of the day, the digital world just moves so fast and it can be really difficult for these structures to keep up given the bureaucratic processes that are in place. Anyway, I'm super intrigued to see what ends up happening this week. the ban is quite literally 7 days out. So I'm sure I'll have more to say next week about that. I have 2 more quick stories, and they have a little bit of a similar theme, even though they are very different. As with a lot of things in the creator economy, it relates to money. So the next thing I want to talk about is Marques Brownlee, who's known online as MKBHD, and his app Panels. So if you don't know who Marques Brownlee is, he's an extremely popular tech YouTuber. He makes a handful of different types of videos, including reviews, unboxings, and of course, kind of explainer content. Marques launched Panels in September last year, and it was basically a subscription-based app that sells high-resolution wallpapers for your phone. These subscriptions initially cost around $12 a month or $50 a year, which would basically give users full access to the collection of wallpapers and also remove ads, so it's probably a better user experience. And he has spoken about how he was inspired to create this app after receiving questions from his audience about where he got his wallpapers from when he would show them across various videos. But Panels obviously did expand beyond that, where it became a way to platform various artists and designers. And while there were obviously good intentions, as you can probably guess, people did have quite a strong reaction to the app. Many users couldn't believe that the YouTuber was charging for phone wallpapers when this is literally something you could get for free. In October 2024, Marques ended up taking to YouTube with a video to explain how Panels came to be, as well as the pricing, where Panels ended up taking a number of steps to try and appeal to the masses after a wave of backlash, which included taking away ads for the free experience, as well as offering a cheaper subscription option.
There are so many reasons why we failed on the price front. First of all, just to bring it back, a wallpaper app is niche. Paying for a wallpaper is even more niche. And so like a subscription to wallpapers is something that I think less than 1% of 1% of people would ever even consider. So if you're looking at Panels and find yourself thinking, this seems crazy paying for a wallpaper, you're not wrong. You are most people.
So that was how Panels came to be and how it was initially received. But earlier this week, Marques shared an update on the app. In an unlisted YouTube video titled Panels Update, he reflected on the journey with the app, but ultimately revealed that the app would be closing down.
It's been a roller coaster of a ride. I mean, the app ended up like #1 in both app stores for the photos category. And I think we had more than 2 million total wallpaper downloads by the end of the summer. But at the end of the day, it wasn't able to sustain. We knew it was niche, but, we made mistakes in making our first app, and ultimately we weren't able to turn it into the vision that I'd had.
In a statement on panels.art, he did expand on this more, where, quote, "Earlier this year, the makeup of the development team changed, and despite our best efforts to bring in collaborators who shared our passion and vision, we weren't able to find the right fit. It was also revealed that the team would be open sourcing the Panels app code, so if anyone had the desire to pick up where Panels left off, they could do so." I thought this story kind of goes to show how even some of the most popular creators who have specific subject matter that they cover and have maybe a niche audience or specific target demographic can't necessarily rely on said audience to support them. They are obviously going to have to produce a quality product and one that is necessary. Like, gone are the days when audiences would literally buy into anything a creator would produce. I thought Amanda Silberling put it perfectly for TechCrunch, where she wrote, quote, "Brownlee couldn't overcome the challenge of trying to create a paying market for something that consumers are not accustomed to paying for." And I feel like that is really the key takeaway here. Okay, we are finally at my last story for today, and this is a little bit of a quick one to mention, and it has been going on for a couple of weeks now, but it only just came across my desk. And this one is a little bit more of an industry one, and also once again about money a little bit. But we need to talk about how there are a couple of TikToks going viral talking about how Aaron Parnas is killing journalism, quote unquote. If you aren't familiar with Aaron, he is super popular online, where he first gained a following for breaking down various political issues and news stories on social media platforms like TikTok. Now he continues to post videos on TikTok and also on other platforms like Substack, where he has a newsletter called The Parnas Perspective. In his Substack, he condenses breaking news stories for his audience, and there are a lot of Substacks out there that do a similar thing. For context, he has over 630k subscribers, like literally goals. Please go subscribe to our Substack so we can reach that. And considering the massive audience he has, there's clearly value in what he does, and of course in new media, social media first journalists in general. But a creator named @public_engagement took to TikTok with a review of Aaron's content, alleging that he is quote unquote killing journalism. He claimed that Aaron rarely cites his sources, or at least doesn't do so effectively. And I'll insert a clip of the TikTok here.
We have some very serious news right now. Aaron Parnas is killing journalism. I reviewed Parnas' videos and posts and found that he rarely credits his sources. In this Substack post, typical of most, he summarized 18 news items and only attributed one of them to the original reporting. And he didn't even bother to put a hyperlink. By taking the work of news outlets and passing it off as his own, Parnas is having the same effect on journalism as Google AI summaries, which have been killing the financial model of digital publishers who rely on web traffic to drive ad revenue and engagement with their audiences. He's choking off one of journalism's last lifelines at a time when over half of all journalism jobs have been lost since 2005. I get that everybody's busy, and Parnas offers a valuable service, condensing the news into an easily digestible form. And that's important in this day and age where our attention is compromised. But if he really gave an isht about the Walter Cronkite era of news, he'd be uplifting and championing journalism in the public interest, not grifting off of it.
@public_enlightenment has since made a follow-up video showing some of the comments that Aaron left on his initial video, where he explained that he does indeed cite his sources effectively, especially when he relies on third parties, but often he does do his own sourcing and reporting. But in that video, @Public Enlightenment kind of doubled down on his initial argument.
Aaron Parnas did not like my video about how he profits off of hardworking journalists without crediting them. In the comments, he repeatedly insisted that he always cites his sources.
Now, I didn't want to cover this story to talk about Aaron Parnas specifically, but I do think it brings an interesting conversation to the forefront about plagiarism in social media first journalism. And we truly are just in an era of plagiarism at this point, especially with AI and ChatGPT. But it was a thing before AI really took over. I'm not sure how much you guys remember this, but video essayist H. Bummer Guy, whose real name is Harry Brewis, went super viral a couple years ago for his almost 4-hour-long documentary about plagiarism and the epidemic it is in the digital space. He focused specifically on the video essay space, calling out various creators, and using these examples, he ended up outlining the key elements of plagiarism on YouTube, specifically when creators write entire scripts using uncredited quotes or creating videos with footage from existing documentaries. And I definitely would recommend you guys to watch this. Maybe not the whole thing, it is quite long, but if you have the time, definitely go for it. Aside from this whole video and saga has also brought up conversations about the cost of journalism and the role of new media versus traditional media. Social media first journalism is clearly so important. I mean, that is part of what Centennial is. That is what Centennial is. And it is clearly a powerful way to connect with young audiences. But the investigative stuff and truly independent reporting is literally impossible without funding. And unfortunately, it is hard to get funding as the little guy, or at least to source the level of funding needed for that kind of investigative work. That is why I think so many of these new age media companies / journalists need to coexist with traditional mastheads, because I think they can really work together. But I'm definitely curious to hear what you guys think about this story and how you kind of see plagiarism fitting into digital first journalism. Is that an issue you have come across? I'm curious. Well, that is everything from Mini Tech Scroll today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and Lauren will speak to you guys tomorrow. Please join our Patreon. Other than that, thanks for listening. Bye.